Welcome to For the Record. I'm John Ehrlichman. We're here in the lobby of the Four Seasons Hotel in New York City. Isadore Sharp founded Four Seasons way back in 1961, and he's since spent close to half a century building it into one of the world's best-known luxury brands. There are now more than 80 Four Seasons locations around the world. But of course, this is no easy time for any company, especially if you're in the luxury space. So I started our conversation by asking Izzy Sharp, how's business?
Well, look, we're suffering like every other hotel company, and like most other companies as well. So we're going to be off during the course of this year, probably 20% over last year. But everything sort of was going along reasonably well until the last part of '08. And then everything fell off a cliff. And we're going to be conservative going through the balance of '09. And hopefully by that time we get closer to the end, things will be moving in the other direction.
You're a global business. What about different parts of the world? Some holding up better than others?
Middle East is a little stronger than what we're doing here in North America and Europe. But we're not holding out that this will hold. The unprecedented word that's being thrown around all the time is because it is a global recession. I mean, there isn't any bright spots that sort of give you a little comfort. And I think the fact that our industry has been unfortunately negatively hammered for the wrong reasons, which I think has been corrected now. Government's, I think, seen that we're a very strong industry in terms of the rest of the economy. You know, we're close to 10% of the GDP. We're 1 in 12 people work in this industry. So, you know, it's vital for others that this industry keeps growing.
And you've been through a lot of downturns in the past. You call this unprecedented. How does it compare to past recessions?
It's not much different in terms of the decline. I think where it will be different is the extent. It'll, I think, take longer to come through it. And then it'll probably be a slower growth. I think this crisis, because it's been a financial one, and a lot of our business comes through that financial sector. So that's a readjustment completely in terms of those major corporations. And so that's why I think it'll take a little bit longer for the recovery.
Anecdotally, what can you tell us about the Four Seasons customer? Do they say, I still love the brand, I can't really afford the suite right now? What are you hearing?
We hear exactly the same thing now as we've always heard, that frugality becomes king. You know, perceptions of how people act. And, you know, most companies are trying to conserve, lower cost, reduce their expenditures. So we work with them in terms of trying to find out what their needs really are and negotiate. You know, we're aggressive in our marketing. But it's not natural for people to sort of stop doing what they have always done. And our experience has shown over several recessions, as things turn around, people get back to their normal way of doing business. And I don't think any company can do business without face-to-face contact.
And when you say negotiate, are you talking about price adjustments? Are you adjusting your pricing?
We're not adjusting price as much as adjusting how we would package a deal. So if your company's coming and there's a three days, we might throw in 1 day for free. So it's that type of adjustment rather than reducing rates, because people aren't coming to us for a rate adjustment. They're coming because of the value that the company has proven is important to the customer.
You mentioned the financial services industry has a lot of companies that stay at the Four Seasons. Here, for example, at this location, I'm sure there are plenty of business deals that have been worked out over lunches or stays here. Do you get a kick out of that?
It is. These are, you know, high rollers, people who can afford to spend the money when they're in their hotel. They are our target market worldwide. But we serve their purposes. I mean, they're using us because they're very busy. Time is of the essence. And they know when they're here, they're going to get everything working like clockwork. So their business meeting is going to end up, to the degree we're involved and what we have to do, a success. So they're not here coming for the glamour of it. They're coming for the function of what we can do for them. It all comes down to value. What the customer considers to be of value, they will buy. And the reason we've got that competitive advantage, which gives us a premium, our RevPARs are historically maybe 25% higher than our competitor, because of the service. It's not what the general manager is able to do. He's booking the business and making sure he's attending to it. What we know and what our employees know is that everybody's job is important. Everybody.
And what is it today that you do, Four Seasons, to raise the bar again? What's the strategy?
There's no blockbuster concepts, breakthroughs. They're all what I call incremental changes. Things that we find and constantly trying to discover what are the customer's needs today. You know, your age group is very different than when I was thinking of what I needed to travel, as my grandkids' needs will be different. So we're constantly examining how we should be addressing the needs of the customer, as that was the first strategy, because I didn't know anything about the hotel business. So in thinking of what to build for the very first hotel and how to operate, I approached it from the customer's perspective. What would the customer consider to be useful? What would they consider to be of value, so therefore they will pay what you need to give them that? So today, the rooms are no longer just a bedroom. It's an office. It's a meeting room. So all the facilities in that room must be adapted for a very good night's sleep, which is always the first priority, but also for us to be able to sit in that room and have a business meeting, for you to travel with all your technology and have it easily accessible. So that's continually improving. You know, you wouldn't go to a hotel and ask, do you have an internet connection? You would say, where's the high-speed internet connection? Our approach is that there isn't anything we do that shouldn't have a purpose, a value to the customer.
One thing you highlight in your new book, Four Seasons, The Story of a Business Philosophy, is the importance of all your employees and the feedback that you get from lower-level employees, too, how important they are in the overall process. Are you getting good feedback from them on what you can be doing right now to help the business?
Well, that's exactly how we manage during these times, is to develop a consensus with our employees. In other words, we put forward a mandate of what we, as a company, what's our policy during these times. And the words are control without compromise. So it means this is the time management skills are going to be tested. Be creative. How can you manage this business without compromising the guest experience? So the people get together, employees, they work together to find out what's the best way to do this. They will mutually decide, rather than last person in, first person out, let's all take a day off a week, let's take holidays, I'm beat. So they work through a work pool. Someday you might be putting on a waiter's uniform, the next day you might be putting on an engineer's uniform. So you try to find out what's the way for everybody to continue to keep as many hours as they can. Now you are forced into, reducing your staff. But even in that process, how you handle that is consistent with how you've handled the employees since day one. And try to help them. If it's finding a new job, it's outplacement. And you don't lose contact. In other words, you're saying, look, as soon as we have an opening, we want you back. So this whole attitude of working with people in a manner which gives them what they need, because what you're asking from them is to give the customer what they need.
Let's talk about you specifically. I believe you signed a 3-year contract when you did the deal to go private. So we're well into that contract now. Give us an update on your intentions as CEO.
Yeah. It's not a 3-year contract. I agree that I would definitely, subject to health, definitely stay on for that period of time. But I have no intentions of, calling it at the end of that period. As long as I can continue to add value to the company and have a role to play, and healthy enough to keep doing it, then I'll let the time determine when I should maybe step aside. Every CEO's main job is really to prepare for the succession, not just in my position, but in every senior position. So we've always had succession plans in place, way back when we were first going public to now when we went private, to show the new investors, look, this is a team that's in place. These are the people who will continue to be able to move up. And we've had transition of senior leadership at the very top of this company 3 separate times, and it's been seamless because we have a policy of promotion from within, and promotion from within at the very top is the most important, because then everybody else's role is protected. They all know what's happening. Nobody has to worry that their career track is going to be forgotten. So that is in place. So it's the unexpected or the inevitable. The plans will keep this company moving forward.
In all your years running this business, is there one piece of advice you've picked up from someone over the years that's always stayed with you?
There is, and it's actually it's in the book where I identify that very important relationship with a gentleman called Sir Gerald Glover, who gave me this remarkable opportunity of the hotel in London, England. Over a 4-year period, I'd be flying over to London and meeting with him, having lunch, meeting his friends. And I asked him at the end of it, a couple years after, Sir Gerald, how could you give me such an important project when you knew I really didn't have the wherewithal to live up to my financial obligations if things didn't work out? And he said something that I've never forgotten. He said, business is done on trust and belief. So all those business meetings weren't about the business points per se. They're about a trusting relationship. And I've always used that as a fundamental of business, is that you have to be able to work with people that you can trust and that they can understand what that means in terms of commitments. And I think that sort of seeps down right through the company, that ethics really are the thing you have to rely upon.
I mentioned you're no longer a public company. You did a deal a couple of years ago, basically took the company private. You're still an equity investor in the company. You've got a couple of well-known partners in the business, Bill Gates through his holding company, and Prince Alwaleed. Tell us about the relationship with those two individuals.
Well, going from a public to a private company wasn't done necessarily for financial reasons. It was an opportunity that was presented to me that we could control the change of ownership in a manner which ownership would probably never have to change again. And that appealed to me because having control of the company, if something happened to me, of course, my family might have to put the company up for sale, and then it could be in anybody's hands. So this opportunity of being able to associate with two, what I would consider long-term investors. Now, they have always been an investor in Four Seasons. Kingdom has been our largest single shareholder since 1994. And the Cascade Company has also been an investor of considerable size. So they saw this as an opportunity, as a company they knew very well. They knew we had a very robust growth program that financially was going to be a good return on their investments. So it's worked out wonderfully well for that purpose, because then people within the company, and when I say within the company, I'm talking our owners, our people who invest with us, our employees, really see that the legacy of Four Seasons, what it stands for today, will continue indefinitely. There will not be a change as a result of maybe a change of ownership. So it really has many great benefits long term. And for me personally, there's no change. We don't run the company any differently than when we were a public company. Save a little money in terms of all the reporting procedures. But we've always run the company as what's right for the business point of view, rather than trying to juggle the markets quarter by quarter.
And what about that relationship with the Prince as well? How often do you hear from him? How often does he have input? Does he have more input these days than in the past?
No, he's available, always accessible. We meet a couple times a year. He has representatives who we meet with on a very regular basis. We will talk if there's an issue that would require their input. But basically they're saying, look, they bought into a management company. We don't have any hard assets. So what they invested in was the intellectual capital of the company, our people. And therefore, their interests are best served by the people continuing doing what they're doing. The Prince on his side has been exceptionally helpful. Many hotels that he started and built and is continuing to do that today. But we didn't make this deal for them to have to become a financial source for us. They're available, they're there. If we have a business deal that suits them, we'll be presenting it to them. So they both are, I use the word because the Prince did it when we first met. It's more than a partnership, it's an alliance, which really has very long-term meaning to it.
Sharp, as you might expect, has final say in how every Four Seasons hotel and resort looks and feels. But as for owning the properties, life lessons have taught him that it doesn't make business sense. One of the things that always appealed to investors when you were a public company was the business model, that you have management contracts, long-term contracts with property developers. Takes out some of the cyclicality of the business. How does that serve you well in this particular environment?
It serves us very well because we don't get into any financial problems. So we're able to weather the rough storms, stay on course through these times, because we aren't financially under any pressure. We've got a very strong balance sheet. We have a positive cash flow. And this business model was put in place many, many years ago just because of this. I just saw that we couldn't possibly continue to own real estate and expect to grow the company. It's too capital intensive. So way back in 1976 is when I first started this concept of working to develop a management company. Now, it's taken a long time to be able to get it to be as pure as it is today, but it's a good business model to be able to grow the company worldwide.
Now, being a manager of hotels rather than owning those properties does make it a less cyclical business, but you have to be looking at this market right now and the property values and the deterioration of those property values and thinking maybe there could be some opportunities there for you?
There could be, but remember, I got into this business through the real estate end. That was and I still have, and I still enjoy that aspect of it, and realize the great values built into ownership of real estate. But years back, I got into trouble by the ownership, and I saw that I can't possibly try to develop the hotel business and own the building. So I put together what to me at that time was a necessary business model, that I would invest as an owner a limited amount of equity, dollars. And I calculated that by taking what I would earn as management fees for the first 5 years. I would take 70% of that and go to the bank and say, look, I will pledge my fees if you will lend me this money for me to get this deal. So it was a bit of a circle. And the amount that I would invest, I protected in terms of cash calls. That if there was going to be an additional amount of money required, which usually there is in overruns or as we're running in now a downturn, then I had the privilege of either putting up my share, whether it's 10 or 15%, or reducing my equity. So I capped my financial liabilities. I used to call it COD. I'm putting my money up. Don't come to me if you need more. But if you do, I will make a choice. That's the business model that we are presently doing today. So we still invest, but it's always with the protection of the financial liabilities that go with ownership of real estate.
And how many property development partners do you have overall?
We've got 83 hotels, and we've got 40 in the works, so we're well over 50 different owners all around the world, and new ones are coming almost weekly.
I wanted to talk about one of your newer projects, actually one right here in Manhattan, with another guest from For the Record, Larry Silverstein. Yeah. Tell us about that, how that project's coming along.
Well, we've made the deal. I think Larry intends to go full steam ahead once the financial markets settle down. So he's cleared the site, ready to go. We've coordinated and got our letters of intent and management contract signed. So I think it'll go ahead as soon as the markets settle down and financing becomes another normal way of doing business. And it'll be great for us to have a hotel down in that part of New York.
The Four Seasons business model of managing and not owning allows Sharp to stay on the lookout for new opportunities. And he says some of the most promising opportunities are those overseas.
We have over 40 hotels that are into one stage of development or another. China is a big growth for us at this point in time, major, because you hear of cities that you haven't heard about, can hardly pronounce them, and they're a city of 10 million people. So China certainly is on our radar screen, as is India. We have 2 hotels in Russia, one in St. Petersburg, one in Moscow, that'll open probably next year. So our plans are really worldwide. Middle East. We're slowly moving into Latin America, South America, but Europe, North America. Still things happening in North America. We'll open, I think, in the year 2010, Baltimore and Denver. So it's worldwide, and that's really what we have going for us now, is that the demographics of how our world of business is going to change is dramatic, and it affects the hotel industry. If you think about, going back years ago, we were North America, Europe, some parts of the Far East. Well, now you've got India, China, Asia, Latin America, emerging markets of over 3.5 billion people. And they're not coming out of the farms, they're coming out of the universities. Education is high on their list of priorities. So we're going to have a very competitive, very important market that will be using hotels, because you cannot do business without this face-to-face contact. Technology will get you so far, but you have to continue to still feel and get eye-to-eye with contact with people.
Over the years, Sharp has learned that with new opportunities come new challenges. Take, for example, the Caribbean resort Four Seasons runs in Nevis. I asked Sharp about building on an island with virtually no infrastructure and plenty of hurricanes.
It was actually an important message that we gained, lessons learned in Nevis. Now, unfortunately, Nevis has been hit so many times with hurricanes. Unfortunately, it's closed right now because of the last hurricane. And the first hurricane was just as we got started building. And that was interesting because our then president of operations, John Sharp, took charge and organized a lift of equipment, called the general manager, John Stouse, said, "John, what do you need? Tell us what we can do." He said, "Look, things you need down here are chainsaws, generators, clothes." So we organized in-house collecting everything from everybody in Toronto. And we were the first airlift into Nevis. We got Air Canada, they donated their ship. As a matter of fact, the Premier of St. Kitts, after all this was done, said, "What do you need in St. Kitts when these things happen?" And he said, "A Four Seasons hotel." So they really did a good job there. But what we learned in Nevis was, and this is John Stouse, who was the general manager there, we hired 500 Nevisians. Now, these are kids who never mind had hotel experience, some had never had work experience. These are nothing on the island. The island was losing its population. And what John was able to do was to muster these people together, teach them what was required to serve a very demanding clientele, usually from New York. And I asked him, I said, "John, what do you hold out as how you did all that?" And he said, "It took patience and understanding." And I knew exactly what he meant. Understanding was what these people didn't know. Why have you got two forks on the table? You mean there's more than one type of tea? So it required that type of knowing what people had to learn and the patience to be able to not make them feel that they should know. So it gave us then the confidence that we could go anywhere in the world, anywhere, and pull together a core of people from that community and create a hotel that would compete with here in New York, Hawaii, Chicago. So it really proved there are people everywhere who will buy into this opportunity to become part of an organization that they really feel they have a purpose. So Nevis was more than just a successful resort. We learned how to overcome hurricanes, it's the fourth one. But we also learned that we could do things and rely upon people around the world.
And didn't you have examples or hear about people going home and practicing at home, proper place settings?
Exactly. I was there about a year or so after, and I was having room service. Now, room service there, remember, this is cottages stretched out over a mile. So you forget the butter, and you're half a mile away from the kitchen. So I asked the young lady, I said, where did you learn to do this job? It's very technical and perfectly done. You've set this table up perfectly. I said, where did you work before? And she said, oh, sir, I have not worked before. So I said, well, how did you gain this knowledge? And she said, well, they let me take everything home so I could practice on my parents. So you just saw that management knew what was required to bring people who had the desire to do something that they had never done before and to prove they could do it. And that's, that's learning curves. So these are the things you gain an insight into the service business and what's possible through people.
Regardless of how long Izzy Sharp stays at the helm, you're going to be seeing more Four Seasons hotels and resorts. There are plans to double the number of locations over the next 10 years, ensuring Izzy Sharp's empire continues to grow. For the record, I'm John Ehrlichman.